So How to Train Your Dragon is the most recent Hollywood remake of an animated feature, this time being from DreamWorks instead of Disney, meaning that other companies are now going to take a page out of Disney's playbook, which is admittedly disappointing. I can't say I'm a fan of these remakes. I and many others feel that most of these remakes are unnecessary, and they could probably just re-release the original movies in theaters. I do think it could be interesting if we got remakes of movies that originally flopped at the box office, like for example The Black Cauldron, a movie that only grossed $21 million on a $44 million budget. It flopped so hard that it lost money to the Care Bears movie, which comparatively had a much smaller budget too, only $2 million. I wouldn't be surprised if the average moviegoer wasn't even aware this movie was in Disney's library, but instead they're remaking some of the company's biggest and most impactful films. The film was based on a book series called The Chronicles of Prydain, and it could be interesting to see Disney revisit this material, but we probably won't ever see them do something like that, because they do rely very heavily on nostalgia to market these remakes. And if most people don't even know that the original exists, they probably had to start over completely when it comes to marketing. Nostalgia is a very powerful marketing tool, and now DreamWorks is taking a page out of Disney by making a live-action remake of one of their most popular franchises. When it comes to this specific live-action remake, it kind of felt more like a remastered video game or a director's cut of a movie, because it was basically shot for shot of the original, with an extra 25 minutes added onto it. On the bright side, it's not entirely offensive or betrays the message of the original like we've seen with some other remakes. But on the other hand, it totally lacks its own identity to the point where it just felt like, why not just watch the original? Although to be fair, that's usually the case with these remakes in general, even if they do their own thing. Gerard Butler was easily a standout. He's actually reprising his role as Stoic from the animated feature, so seeing him basically cosplay his own character was admittedly pretty cool. But I think it would have been cooler if it was like a staged version of How to Train Your Dragon, instead of a live-action remake. But he was still a highlight of the film. He clearly really enjoys this character, and he's a commanding presence in every scene he's in. Also, hearing Where No One Goes during the movie really hit hard, but again, that's probably just nostalgia talking. It is basically just How to Train Your Dragon all over again, plus it's a really cool song. So in the end, this remake had the largest opening for any movie in the How to Train Your Dragon series. This is just speculation on my part, but animation has a tendency to be looked down upon by regular moviegoers, often just written off as kid stuff, while live action is typically seen as having a broader appeal across age ranges. Some people even treat animation as a genre rather than a medium, which as an animation fan I find very disappointing, but unfortunately that's just kinda how the cookie crumbles. So now Hollywood gets to have a 1-2 punch of banking on nostalgia, while also having a wider audience be willing to see it in the first place because of the live action medium. But again, I'm just speculating, though I wouldn't be surprised given how risk-averse Hollywood is right now, pretty much only relying on sequels and remakes, resulting in the modern movie landscape feeling pretty barren when it comes to originality and creativity. Companies being profit-driven means they want to have as much return on investment as possible, leading them to stick with the safest options. And even if things don't work out the way they were expecting, they'll just move on. Like we saw with Disney. Snow White was easily their worst performing remake. Disney didn't exactly do themselves any favors, managing to upset both fans and normies alike. Things like redesigning the dwarves to be CGI instead of actual actors, making them Uncanny Valley nightmare fuel, along with the main actresses managing to sour themselves to audiences, with some interviews that did not land the way they'd hoped, leading to a major box office disaster, to the point where it looked like remakes, at least regarding Disney princesses, were now off the table, with Tangled's remake being put on hiatus. But then Lilo and Stitch premiered only a few months later. Stitch has long been a major moneymaker for Disney, being beloved internationally, and the remake was majorly successful at the box office, and it looks like it's managed to invigorate Disney's faith in these remakes. And now there's reports that Tangled, for better or for worse, is possibly back on the menu, depending on how well Moana's remake does in theaters. But Moana, like Stitch, has managed to prove itself as a major force for Disney. So fortunately for Disney, and unfortunately for those of us who are wanting some more creativity and originality from Hollywood these days, it looks likely that Tangled might be an option again. On top of that, on Pixar's front, things are not looking great. They have an upcoming film called Elio, and its opening projections are abysmal, and I'm worried that they're going to end up remaking their own animation library in live action too. Currently, they don't have any plans to, and a higher up made a statement explicitly saying they aren't interested in doing remakes in an interview from last year, which is a great sign, but you know, it's Hollywood and I wouldn't be surprised if they end up following the money. Maybe later instead of sooner, but still. Getting an excessive amount of Toy Story sequels is bad enough. It would be nice if an original movie was really successful at the box office. Show Hollywood that there's still money to be made there. Critics seem pretty favorable in regards to the film, but there just doesn't seem to be much interest from the public. I guess we'll have to see how things play out. Back on Disney's front, it's been reported that they're having trouble when it comes to the Hercules remake. Apparently the Russo brothers are on board to direct, but the two of them aren't as interested in making a rehash of the original, and instead want to pivot and focus on Hades. When it comes to these live-action Disney remakes, there's typically two kinds that we get. Either ones that are more or less shot for shot of the original, like The Lion King or Beauty and the Beast, or ones that pivot and instead focus on a central character from the original, usually the villain, a la Maleficent or Cruella, which seems like the path that the Russo brothers are interested in going down, but the Disney company are the ones who are pulling for a faithful adaptation. Admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of these villain origin stories, not that I'm a big fan of the other option either, but when it comes to these villain stories, they typically deviate so much from the original that these are totally different characters. Like Cruella went from being an eccentric fashion designer who would be willing to do anything for a look, including killing puppies, to what is, in my opinion, an extremely convoluted plot, where she's taking on this diabolical fashion designer and Dalmatians killed her mom, not to mention the way it messes with the lore of the original. They kind of made Pongo and Perdita brother and sister. I guess I didn't think that through. At least I hope this was just an accident. Then they took all the bite out of Maleficent. On top of that, I don't really care for how they had to reduce the other characters in order to make Maleficent look good. Not to mention in this version, she always knows where Aurora is, which I think was a poor choice when it comes to the overall narrative of the story. Again, both of these cases could have just been a totally new character, but then they wouldn't be able to take advantage of nostalgia. So that leaves us with Hercules. On the one hand, I do think that there's potential for a Hades movie, considering the fact that they have a whole mythology to draw on. My dad's a huge Greek mythology fan, and growing up he was not keen on Disney's Hercules. Granted, the original myth involves him being cursed with madness by Hera and killing Megara and their children, so I can kinda see why Disney deviated so much from the original. But still, maybe a remake that sticks a little bit closer to the original myth might be interesting. You can still adapt it to where it's family friendly. So even though I love the original Disney Hercules, despite my dad's complaints, I'm not totally against a remake. Granted, it's Disney, so they have the funds and resources to do both, but with Disney's track record, my hopes aren't very high. So those are my general thoughts on the current state of remakes right now. What do you guys think of all of this? Do you think any of them have potential? Or do you think it's going to be more cash grab slop? Let me know in the comments below, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching everyone, I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members. Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Equestron, Norman Sweet Cream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Bam, Lucas Geist, J Draws, Meowsers, Sky, Philip, Isaac Martinez, Garcia XV Legend, Tobias Weller, Bandito Bane, Mac B909, Dakari the Professor, Todd McCaffrey, Omni Fair, Cavalcoj, Strider Exile, Phil C, Killer Bomb, Slawa Saporiguez, Entwined Boot 301, Griffin of Might, Frankie Camarillo, Datadyne Executive, Crimson Phantom, Jin the Goblin, Papa Hud 69, The Gengar King, Daunter, and G-Rock. Thank you for the support, and if you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and that part's free. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.